Hey guys, welcome back to a new video. I'm Stephanie Fisher. I'm a licensed counselor here in the state of Michigan, and I am owner and operator of In Progress Counseling. We're going to talk a little bit about when a traumatic event happens, when a small T trauma or a large T trauma shows up. One of the things that people might experience is a unfamiliarity or even a harsh appraisal of what their body and what their physiology goes through as they metabolize and process something that's been really overwhelming for them. And so when we look at what is trauma, typically we're talking about a sudden and immediate perception of overwhelm of our capacity to tolerate, deal with, or address something. And so it can be just this shock, this confusion, this disorientation. Those are very common experiences. When that happens, there are physiological mechanisms at play. Now, I can't go through all of the things our body does, and frankly, each of us might have different processes that kind of show up, or some that are stronger than others. But physiologically, there are things that happen when I am suddenly and completely overwhelmed. So adrenaline might be coursing through my adrenals. That would be very common. Cortisol might be dumping in my gut. I might have other responses that show up that, again, may look different person to person, but we're talking about a psychological and a physiological sense of overwhelm, and there's different mechanisms at play. So what can happen is when I'm processing through with clients, they might at the kind of, once safety has been reestablished, so they're in a safe context where they can now kind of process what's just happened. A lot of times there's a shutdown that can happen, or there's just a complete emotional response or a physiological kind of like shakeout that has to happen. And so one of the books that I'll often kind of bring front and center with clients is The Body Keeps the Score from Bessel van der Kolk. And one of the analogies he uses in there is really, at least for me, quite helpful in the physiological processing of overwhelm. And so he'll talk about if like two squirrels go toe to toe, and it's all about at that point survival instinct, where adrenaline and whatever else is running through their little bodies as they're like fighting to the death, and whether or not one wins or doesn't win, when they separate, both are going to find a place of safety, like maybe they run to different trees. And the first thing that they do is they physiologically shake out their little bodies because that adrenaline has built up in them. And you have to let that adrenaline go. And for some, it's kind of like an immediate like whoosh. And for others, it's just kind of, if you think of like a valve that's been released, and maybe it's crying, maybe it's shaking, maybe it's just an uncertainty or a pervasive sense of dis-ease. It's very common. That's very normal. A few months back, when my now husband and I were driving and we hit a deer, there was no way to not sit in kind of that shock stupor. And then as we're sitting on the side of the road waiting for the police to show up and for the wrecker to show up, the body just started shaking. Now, I'm not actively scared. What I'm doing is I'm metabolizing that was the sudden onslaught of physiological mechanisms and a sense of overwhelm, and for some potentially a sense of helplessness, right? And then your anxiety shows up and says, well, what about this? What about this? Well, what about this? And so possibly I have more pieces at play physiologically that I'm sorting through or trying to metabolize all in real time. All of that to say, when a client shows up and they're kind of like, well, why did I respond that way? It's like, well, because your body went into survival mode. And once you found safety, your body had to metabolize and shake through that built up energy. Not only is that very common, it's actually the first step in trying to recalibrate yourself back to calm. It's important, it's necessary. It looks all types of different ways. For some people, it's going to be crying. For others, it's going to be shaking. For others, it's going to be kind of just, breathing and shutting down a little bit until they can reemerge and feel a sense of okayness again. For some, it might be a couple hours. For others, it might be a couple days or a couple weeks. Those are important processes. They're appropriate when there's a sudden overwhelm, and then my body has to recalibrate once it's found safety. There's going to be different sequences that happen in each of us, but they're very common and they're important.